Welcome back, everybody. Investors staying optimistic about some of President Trump's key proposals that won him the White House, particularly tax reform. Our next guest has been working on a plan to try and save small business. His Jumpstart America plan would lower the corporate income tax by 20%, bring down capital gains and dividends rates to 15%, and allow companies to repatriate cash with a tax of 5%. He also wants to allow 100% depreciation of fixed assets and preserve last-in, first-out accounting, all of which he says will benefit small businesses. Joining us right now is Congressman Roger Williams. He is a member of the House Financial Services Committee. And, sir, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good to be on the show.
Why don't we talk about your experience, your background, and why that brought you to this tax plan? You are somebody who is a small business owner himself.
Well, I am a small business owner in Texas. I've been in business almost 45 years. Been through a lot of things, from dollar gasoline to 20% interest. And I can tell you, since September of '08 with the Obama economy, it's been really hard for Main Street. And we've got to send Main Street a message that allows them to begin to make money, take risk, get reward. And the government needs to understand Main Street America can cash flow our country. The government needs to make government smaller. That's the pay for, as opposed to continuing to take taxes away, raise taxes. That's not a good message to send small business.
We have seen small business optimism rise pretty significantly since the election, and I think you can probably tie that back to the idea that many in the marketplace think that tax reform is going to get pushed through this Congress. However, we've seen how difficult that can be with health care, with the policy bill that came through, and I guess I wonder what makes you optimistic that you can find more common ground on the tax bill than was found in the health care bill.
Well, I think when you talk about tax reform, it's a little easier for people to understand than health care. And I think we see that the Main Street America is ready to go. I mean, half the payroll, half the workforce is generated by small businesses. This was a promise President Trump wanted to deliver on. It's a promise I want to deliver on. And we need to get it going now, because the economy is frankly ready to explode. If we get real tax reform that lets small businesses take risk and get reward. Look, if small businesses make money, they hire people, they buy equipment, they generate income, we put more people in the market, we create more taxpayers, and that's what we need to do, and that's what we do with my program, Jumpstart America.
That's certainly something that would find a welcome audience to a lot of our viewers, many of whom are entrepreneurs and small business owners. However, you're going to have a hard time, I think, selling this to some, not just on the other side of the aisle, but some in your own party. When you start looking at ways to pay for this, we had Grover Norquist, who joined us earlier this week, and said that because health care reform got shot down, that means $1 trillion of potential savings that would have gone into tax reform. By his estimate, that took us from a 20% potential rate on businesses to 28% just by not having those savings. How do you propose to pay for these?
Well, I will say, first of all, Grover has blessed this plan, so he's a good friend of mine. But look, at the pay for necessarily doesn't come from ideas like a border tax. The pay for needs to come by small businesses hiring people, creating more taxpayers, and then all of us up here getting serious about cutting expenses and making government smaller. Sometimes people don't realize the power that small business has to create jobs and to create income and create taxpayers by turning them loose. So when you talk about pay-fors, it's not necessarily a border tax or an idea like that. It's getting government smaller and letting small business cash flow America.
Again, what you're talking about is dynamic scoring, and there are certainly people within the administration, too, including the Treasury Secretary, who's told us that they have a lot of people working on their own ideas about dynamic scoring. Have you talked to other people within your party, though? And is there agreement even within Republicans to do something like dynamic scoring to get you there? Well,
I think when you start scoring, dynamic scoring is the way to go, opposed to static. But I must tell you, being a small business person, they use terms up here that we don't use in business. Nobody uses revenue neutral in business. They don't say we're going to be revenue neutral to their shareholders. They don't say we're going to be revenue neutral to the employees. They say we're going to grow, and we grow this economy by not worrying about terms like static and dynamic and revenue neutral. Let's turn the greatest asset we have as Main Street America loose, and then let all of us in government make government smaller.
Sir, let's talk a little bit more about your own history. I mean, the reason you feel so strongly about tax reform is that when you came into being a small business owner, it was because your father had passed away. The IRS showed up pretty quickly at your doorstep, right?
Well, they did. We have a family-owned business, and now is operated by 3 generations. When my father passed away, in 1990. I was one of those that we had some assets. He left me. I was the only child, but we had no cash. And the IRS was in my office 3 days later wanting their taxes. And back then, it was a $600,000 threshold and a 55% tax. I didn't have the money. So we were able to make a deal with the IRS to pay them out over about 20 years, which is just wrong. So part of our plan is do away with the inheritance tax and let people pass net worth on to their families rather than lose the family business and continue to create more taxpayers and more job opportunity.
We've had Judd Gregg, the former senator who joined us earlier this week and talked a little bit about it. He said the only way he thinks that you actually get things through is by basically stepping on everybody's toes, like what was done back in 1986, where there are no sacred cows. If you're seriously looking at cutting back, there would be no more things like charitable deductions, mortgage interest deductions in the tax bill. Do you agree with a plan like that that would basically inflict some pain on everybody all the way around?
Well, we talk about loopholes, but we need to talk about cash flow before we talk about loopholes. When you start talking about doing away with charitable giving and home mortgage deductions, that goes to the very heart of Main Street America and small business owners and people. So yeah, I think there's other ways to do it, like cutting the size of government and quit spending and addressing what nobody wants to talk to about the entitlements.
The entitlements themselves, though, that is obviously a huge issue. And you're right, nobody wants to talk about them, including the president, who has said he is not going to cut some of these issues. Is that a place you see eye to eye with him, or it sounds like you have a slightly different perspective on this?
Well, I agree with President Trump on everything. He's a businessman, too, but nobody really wants to address that. I mean, I'm one of those that wants to do away with the Department of Education and other areas and drive it down to the states. But at the same time, that doesn't get us to the number of a $20 trillion debt.
Right.
So we've got to begin to cash flow. Who do we ask to cash flow our country? Small business owners. Let's get them hiring people. Let's get them taking risk, and then let's get serious